Other that includes state grants. California, other states have some very interesting grants, regional grants, and there's other agencies such as BARDA, which is really outside the scope of what I'm presenting here. So, but this presentation is going to be mostly about SBIR grants, small business innovation research grants, and so so is it a fit for me? So who's eligible? And so this is strictly speaking, this is eligibility for SBIR and also STTR. STTR is SBIR's sister program. It requires an academic partner. There's a lot more. I mean, typically companies we work with, it's 95% of our customers are SBIR, go the SBIR route. STTR, you need again a public research institute, and it's usually harder just to get all ducks in a row because for profit and non-profit, uh, it's very different, right? The whole dynamics is very different. But again, I mean, if you have a partnership, or maybe if you're a faculty member, if there's if there's a someone from again the research community on this webinar, and it's actually everything else being equal, and STTR is actually easier to get than an SBIR. Okay, so again housekeeping. Again, we have too many people on the webinar to allow live questions. So Q&A is going to be after this, and don't worry. I mean, there is no we can stay. I certainly can stay until the last question has been addressed, at least somewhat. Okay, so the program overview, 4 points. So there is consistently these days over $4 billion annually is earmarked for early stage R&D funding for for-profit companies. It is the largest grant program for for-profit companies in the world, and it's backed by the U.S. Small Business Administration. It's a grant. That means it's money you just get. Okay. But of course, one thing that should be stated here firmly is it's not a government program in the sense that if you meet all the requirements, you're going to get the money. It's a competition, not an entitlement, right? So typically the statistics is some programs less than well below 10% of grant applications get accepted. Now, as far as our batting ratio, I mean, speaking for myself, I mean, my own success ratio, it is better than one third and less than one half. If any if anyone out there guarantees you a successful grant application, they're probably not telling the truth. Okay, that's not possible. There is no such thing. Okay, so there's never a guarantee. Also one important aspect. So grants don't help you start a company, right? Grants help you fund project and R&D project within a company. They provide you funding to do something that is challenging, that you could not otherwise finance through traditional means. So that's too risky for most professional investors, most angel groups, and so forth to fund. So it's really, I mean, one of the criteria is it has to be ambitious, right? Ambitious, but again, scientifically firmly grounded, of course. So things like perpetual motion machines or anything like that, just like in patent applications, they're not allowed, right? So it needs to be realistic. Eligibility, actually, the eligibility is pretty modest, right? So you're a company, and yes, you need to be a company. You cannot individual, you cannot apply for a grant as an individual. You need to have an entity. It can be any entity registered anywhere in the US, LLC, C corp. It doesn't matter, right? So it needs to be more than 50% owned and controlled by US citizens or permanent residents. Okay, in this respect, permanent residents are treated 100% the same as US citizens. So you need to have staff, right? Part-time staff is not only allowed, it's actually common, right? Actually the majority of our customers, the founders usually they usually have other jobs. They usually have day jobs somewhere, right? Or it's oftentimes it's not their only gig, right? So it's perfectly acceptable that especially at the time of application for the grant, you don't need to be a W-2 employee. Actually, you don't need to be a W-2 employee at all at the time of application. Of course, once you get the grant, sort of a few months, a few months after applying, once you're hitting due diligence, right? So you need to be ready to hire, to hire your staff, your primary core staff on W-2. W-2, again, for our non-US audience, these are, this is W-2 just, W-2 does not mean full-time with benefits. They don't need to be full-time, they don't need to get benefits. It just means you're paying a social security contribution, right? Of course, it's something that's funded by the government, so they want you to pay those, right? So yeah, so the only person who needs to be employed the majority of their time is the PI or principal investigator. They need to be employed at least 51% at the startup, not necessarily at the grant on the grant project, but at the startup doing the grant project and other things, right? You should have facilities, right? You should have some sort of physical location, right? So of course the physical location, it can be depending what you're doing, right? If your venture is IT based, it can be a home office. Then of course you should deduct it from the taxes, but it's always better if you have some sort of business address that is different from your home, obviously. And if you're doing anything, hardware, medical devices, anything like that, of course, you need to have a proper facility, and you need to make the point, and you need to convince them that you have the facility to actually execute the grant. Okay. Location for the work. That's number four here. All the R&D must occur on U.S. soil. There is absolutely no compromise for that, right? So So how does it work? So the SBIR, all grants have, three phases: phase one, phase two, phase three. Actually, in most agencies, phase three isn't necessarily called phase three; it's called something else. So I'm not going to talk about phase three here because if you're in this webinar, then uh, I mean, anyone in this webinar is gonna start at phase one. One question we get often: can you start at phase two directly? Uh, the answer is yes. There are some direct to phase two grant solicitations, but if you're a first-time applicant, which I'm assuming pretty much everyone in here is, then those are typically not realistic to get, right? So you should have some sort of track record in getting grants before. Um, so phase one, basically, phase one is you're meant to provide a proof of concept of your technology, the base of your software, your algorithm, your device. If can be an energy technology, right? So basically, you need to give a you need to de-risk you need to package the most risky part of your development work into phase one. So phase one is much more R than D in R&D, so it's much more research than development, right? So phase one, the duration is typically about a year. I mean, again, the majority of our customers, they use 12 months. There are some exceptions in NIH, National Institutes of Health, because that's inherently more difficult, especially if clinical trials are involved that can take longer. But typically, we see 12 months for phase one, and actually, most agencies, phase one is limited to 12 months, right? In phase one, you're awarded anywhere from 75,000 to 400,000. That's a very wide range. That depends mainly on the agency. So typically, I mean, these days the larger agencies, it's typically around 300,000. The DOE Department of Energy is a little less, but typically we're looking at 300,000. And so this is 300,000, and so you have $300,000 to prove the riskiest part of your technology, right? So then there's phase two. So once you've de-risked your proposal in phase one, you can apply for phase two. And in phase two, you're producing a scalable prototype or something that is pretty close to being marketable. Now, how close you can realistically get it depends on what you're developing, depends on what you're building, right? In software, typically what we see is companies, they often that's where they build the product or the feature, right? Or the the goal of the of the proposal it's usually within the scope of phase two, right? Phase two takes it can take anywhere, again, depending on the agency, anywhere from 12 to 36 months. The 36 months, that's again for healthcare, medical device topics typically. The other agencies, it's limited to 24 months. And how much of that you're actually proposing to use, again, depends on how expensive your project is, right? Software, so it's okay. Basically, if you do the math, right? So you do the math, for example, for an NSF grant, right? If you have a software proposal, you have an NSF grant, you have $1.25 million, right? So you can, if you divide 1.25 by 12 months, so you can basically pay for the equivalent of two or three engineering salaries for 2 years. So that's what we typically see, for if you need more hardware, you need to build hardware, or you need to use expensive facilities, right? Then your cash burn rate may be higher, and you may spend that grant money in 12 months in phase two, right? So and here you have different in the lower part of this slide, you have different agencies. So these are the middle line. They're the larger non-defense agencies. That's NSF, is National Science Foundation. I'm gonna dive into them a little bit in the rest of this presentation. Then Department of Energy, obviously energy technologies. Whereas it's not so much, they do have renewable proposals, but it's traditionally it's more um, sort of nuclear technologies, are well represented in the DOE. So actually for the DOE, we typically don't get that many small companies applying. Now, sometimes they have solicitations on, again, solar. They had one that just ended. We had a few customers in solar technologies, but typically typically, if you have traditionally renewable energy, so you would go to either the National Science Foundation or the Department of Defense, which is the on the lower right corner. So that's also a large agency. The other agencies are shown here: USDA, Department of Agriculture, Department of Transportation. They're smaller, also smaller in terms of the budget. So what can be funded? Again, I already said it. If you don't have a company, the grant doesn't help you start a company. So you need to have a company. Uh, so um, so once you have the company, you can propose a project, right? Of course, the company can be brand new, right? But then, of course, the threshold on the impact and on your level of preparation, the technology readiness level on the project is higher if you don't have a track record, obviously. So what is allowed? So your own employees, they need to be W-2 employees. Now you can up to one third of of the direct cost in the grant funding. You can apply. You can spend on subcontractors. They can be individuals working on 1099, or they can be again subcontractors. And I mean, typically we see that. I mean, even individuals on 1099, they typically have their own LLCs, which is we highly recommend that. It's more professional, looks more professional, and it's obviously liability in some cases, right? So then on the left side, the third line, so G&A overheads, general administrative overheads. So that's if you've been following the news regarding grants, that's really where most of the changes have occurred. I mean, obviously in grants in the United States, so they were in the news a lot, and of course, most of the reporting has been about grants for nonprofits, for universities, research institutions. So it's not this, right? Uh, but still, it's there's a de facto limit now to a G&A overhead of 15%. Um, of course, I mean for our customers, typically that's not really a change compared to last year or the last 2 years. I mean, we generally, for again, first-time applicants, we would never attempt to go for a GA for an indirect cost rate of more than 15% anyway. Okay. So then you can pay for, again, if you're doing, software, AI, of course, these days, it's computational resources for AWS or Azure, basically cloud computing, that can be a significant budget item these days. Equipment rental, depending on the equipment, supplies, parts. Okay, so for example, if you're building a prototype, okay, you can have PCBs built, printed circuit boards, for example. If you build electronics, you can have you can buy 3D printed prototypes from anyone who makes them, right? So these are all direct costs. Travel, if it's justified. Now travel is the favorite item for audits, right? So you should be careful that your travel budget is again well justified, that you really looked up how much that plane ticket costs, and again you need to well justify it, especially if you fly to a place, like if you propose to visit a place like Hawaii in the winter. Uh, then major equipment here, that's one important item. That's capital equipment that is only allowed in phase two. In phase one, you cannot buy capital equipment, right? So capital equipment is basically anything. it's anything. I mean, if you know a little bit about taxes, depreciation, anything you would depreciate over several years, right? It's durable, again, durable goods, right? For machinery, like if a 3D printer, for example, right? That's capital equipment. Or your own cluster, your own computing cluster, definitely capital equipment. Okay, what is not allowed? Day-to-day operating costs. The specific itemized day-to-day operating costs are not allowed. You cannot pay rent from the grant. You so that's actually supposed to be in G&A. That's why you get G&A overhead. So your own employees, they cannot be 1099 employees. In phase one, no major equipment. And of course, referring to the previous presentation about patents, you cannot pay for patent, trademark costs, or sales and marketing costs. Now there is TABA, technical and business assistance, where you can after the grant you can spend some money on those items, for example, patenting costs, right? So for a phase one, they allow you up to $6,500. For phase two, up to $50,000, right? But of course, it's this is over a pretty long time, right? Of course, this is not money you will have right away, right? So if you think about what Peter showed in his presentation, you know the timelines involved basically, so you have the 1 year grace period, right? So if you invent something that's been shown to pretty much anybody, you have 1 year to patent it. And and if you look at the timelines for these grant applications, this is it's not enough time, right? So you need to find the money. uh, um, if you really want to patent it, if you want to patent something, some idea maybe you have while writing the grant or so, you need to find an economical way to patent it, to mark your territory, if you will, right? And that's why provisional patents, they're super important in my opinion, super important topic, right? If you're building anything that's patentable. Of course, in phase two, once you have the money, right? So once you're, for $50,000, yeah, you can certainly do something in terms of patents. Okay, so let's dive into the NSF, National Science Foundation. It's we do more grants for NSF than for any other agency. It's by far the broadest agency in terms of scope. I'm going to show a few slides. Show some examples of what it funds. Now, traditionally, the National Science Foundation comes, culturally still out of the physical sciences. They used to, it's more, they used to fund originally, university-based research, physics, relatively basic, but still applied physics. Now it's much broader, right? Now there's a lot of software topics, right? So phase one again is a feasibility study. It's proof of concept, right? So, so again, this is, if you compare what you get for phase one and phase two, 300,000 versus 1.25 million. So it's basically about 20% of your grant amount of phase one plus phase two. It's about 20% of it is in phase one. So basically, of course, phase one and phase two, they're part of the same project, but phase one is the highest risk part of your project, right? So this is basically that's your bottleneck in your innovation bottleneck, right? So you need to come up with a project plan, with an R&D plan, with a roadmap, if you will, that reflects that, right? And that reflects that, and that is backed up by by the scientific literature, um, you know, by um, by the published body of knowledge. And of course, I mean, we as a consultancy, we definitely we will write, if you want us to, we'll write those for you. We have a lot of experience doing that to basically, you know, focus focus the high risk parts into phase one. Phase two again, that's the scale up, right? And then there's phase two B supplements. So there's there's additional funds if you're not ready, right? After phase two, there are additional funds, but it's a topic that's outside the scope of this webinar because again, once you're there, you don't need a webinar like this anymore. Okay, so the evaluation criteria for the NSF, for the NSF, the most important aspect of your grant is it's intellectual merit. Okay, it has to be. I mean, one litmus test, if you will, for a phase one grant application. If if the result of the phase one application, or if the result of the phase one grant can be either published in peer review publications or patented or both, then it's probably a good grant application, right? So again, we're talking about these are technology based proposals they're looking for, right? So this needs to be something that is new to world. Okay, so basically, if you if you come up with a new again energy technologies, blockchain technologies are examples. I'll show a few examples in the next few slides, right? On the other hand, if you have something like okay, maybe a new bike sharing app or a new dating app or anything like that, you know, you'll have a hard time funding it through the NSF, obviously. Okay. Second, most important is commercialization potential. That's oftentimes one aspect that is not as strong. I mean, most founders, most companies that apply for NSF grants, they're often scientists, they're often engineers, right? So they're good at building things and not as good as commercializing than at building. Again, that's another aspect where we come in, right? So we help you write a decent you know a decent commercial uh, 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 plan, basically business plan, commercialization plan for the technology, not necessarily for your whole company. For the rest of your company, you should have a good commercialization plan in place. But for that, for the additional, technology, the additional product you're developing, you want to develop through the grant. So we're definitely helping you, and of course we help you beyond that too. Broader impact, that's also important. Global environmental industry transforming solutions, and the broader impact, that's probably the part that's been affected most by politics, as you might guess, right? So I'll go into that in the following slides. So this is a range of topics that is funded by the NSF. So if you work on anything, if you're building anything or you want to build anything that is on here, then the NSF is it is your agency, right? So it goes from there's advanced manufacturing, that's things like 3D printing. Then for example, in the middle here, distributed ledger, that is blockchain, right? Or that's blockchain technology is part of that category. Distributed ledger, for example, pharmaceutical technologies, medical devices. So basically, the NSF, it really turns out the NSF actually overlaps with most other agencies, right? So a lot of healthcare technologies are funded by the NSF. Of course, the NSF focuses more on the technology as such rather than on the clinical impact, right? For example, the NSF won't fund clinical trials, but if you have a medical device, right? I mean, there's many aspects of the technology you can finance through the NSF, and we have several pending pending projects in that department actually right now. Okay. So again, so to again do a deeper dive just to showcase the breadth of topics, right? There's learning and cognition, right? So if you're in ed tech, education technology, right? So if you have a new methodology to teach anything, right? To uh, for example, advanced inclusive learning technologies, right? So this is with obviously with the focus on special needs education, for example. Then on the right side here, cybersecurity and authentication. That's a very big topic right now. So there's a lot of projects in that right now, right? It's everything from cryptography, authentication. I mean, there's so if you have a fintech startup, financial technology startup, again, if you find anything in here, the NSF could be an option. Again, reach out to us. Distributed ledger, right? Blockchain. That's it's big right now. There's a lot going on. It is definitely one of the funding topics that is on the upswing, especially with this administration. So distributed ledger, it's far broader than blockchain or cryptocurrencies. So there is it's basically you know yeah here trusted identity management, for example, right? It's the whole complex of you know contract verification, irrefutable contracts, for example, right? So now the NSF, how do you apply for an NSF grant? The NSF has a peculiarity, right? You cannot just apply for a grant. You need to get yourself invited, right? So it's basically how do you get invited? You submit a project pitch. Yeah. Actually, other agencies have something similar. They call it letter of intent, right? You need to write a letter to them that you're intending to apply for a grant, and then they tell you whether that intention has merit. So the NSF calls those letters of intent, if you will. It's a project pitch. It's basically a synopsis of your proposed project. It's a brief summary, right? It's a total of up to 1,500 words. It's typically 2-3 pages, right? Only text, right? They You can submit a couple of images, but not many, right? Typically 1 or 2 images. We don't recommend more. So that's you need to submit that before the deadline, because they can take up to 4 weeks to decide on a project pitch. They usually don't take 4 weeks. I mean, I've seen project pitches accepted within 24 hours, right? But that's uncommon. They're usually not that fast. So don't rely that they're super fast. Mhm. So you should assume they actually take 4 weeks. So that means if the deadline is in July 2nd, you need to get a project pitch in June 2nd, or we will prefer by the end of May. And then July 2nd, for example, the next application window for the NSF is July 2nd, actually. And I mean, if you're just getting started, the time is getting pretty tight. So I mean, if you don't have a company yet, if you want to start a company and that applies for a grant in July 2nd, I would almost dare say it's too late, because there's too many other registrations you need to get in a row. So basically, I mean, the whole one of the points of the slide here is really takes deciding to apply for a grant and then applying for it. It's not something you do over the weekend. Okay, if so, I mean, writing a grant, getting it together. I mean, even with ChatGPT, and of course, everyone, all the consultants that are using language models to help in the writing process, but they're not magic bullets, right? So it still takes a long time. It's still, it's getting together, gathering, the literature references, make sure the project, the R&D plan is firm, scientifically firm. It's backed up by the literature and so forth. So it takes a long time. It takes, you know, of course, not continuously, not full time, but it takes 2 3 months to apply for an SS grant, basically. So the structure of an NSF grant, there it has a lot of different parts, a lot of documents you need to submit. The most important one is the project description. It's up to 15 pages. A project, an NSF project description, it has the level. I mean, if you want to have any chance of success, it needs to have the level of a peer-reviewed publication. Okay, think an IEEE publication, whatever the journal in your field is, right? That's the level of scientific sophistication it needs to have. It's something you could publish in principle, and actually a lot of the project descriptions we write for our customers, they end up forming part of their publications. They end up publishing it and use that as major parts of those publications. Budget, it's typically it's up to 5 pages for the budget for the NSF. So here you need to it's important that there's some there's some potential traps in here, right? It's so we need to make sure that everything on the budget is actually fundable, and you need to know what to ask for on the salary. The salary guidelines need to follow the Bureau of Labor Statistics, for example, BLS. These are tables that are published. So it's not easy. I mean, if you've never done it before, it's hard and arduous to just write a budget. That's because it has many moving parts, right? Bio sketches, biographical sketches. That's basically a resume or CV. Now, bio sketches these days, they're standardized among many, but not all agencies, right? So the NSF and NIH and the Department of Energy, they have standardized the biosketch format, and again, it's not a one-on-one translation from your CV, right? Facilities, resources. You need to describe your facilities and resources in a separate document. You need to outline why you have the means and the wherewithal to actually execute the project. Then several other documents, right? So the point is, this is it's complicated. It takes a long time, right? So don't do it yourself. Hire somebody. If you don't hire us, hire somebody else. If you've ever tried to do an NSF proposal, it is pretty daunting. Or NIH, the same thing, or all the agencies. So the evaluation criteria for the NSF, I mean, again, these are unofficial, but they're crucial. It's the NSF prioritizes novelty over everything else. It needs to be novel, scientifically novel. Also, it needs to be a high quality uh, paper. The write up needs to be high quality. Okay, so don't crank out a 15-page document using ChatGPT. I mean, they have algorithms to detect that now, and you're not going to make it, and if you're unlucky, you don't get to apply again. Okay, team expertise is super important, especially if the company is pretty new, right? So of course, if the company has a track record and has been in business and has sales of some products, then the team can be, you know can be a team with less experience, but it's always good to have a strong team. And if your core team is more junior, then it's the more important that you have a board of advisors that is more senior. And again, we'll help you advise. We'll advise you on putting that together. We also have a network, right? I mean, we've played matchmakers before in some way, shape, or form. Business plan, basically a clear path to market viability of your project, of your new product, and of course of your company, right? So partnerships, letters of support are important. Facilities, the quality of your facilities, but that depends on what you're doing, right? I mean, obviously for software, typically you don't need a lot of facilities, right? So that again depends. So here, this is again what. So this is this slide compares the National Science Foundation with a DoD grant, the Department of Defense grant. Now, the DoD typically, the Department of Defense is looking for technologies in their grant solicitations. They're looking for technologies that are more ready for prime time, right? That are more readily usable. Whereas the NSF, I mean, some application or some grant applications that do well in the DoD, they may get rejected by the NSF on account of being too far along, right? So they will tell you, well, you've already developed this, right? So why do you ask us for money, right? Which of course makes sense from their viewpoint. So this is just a comparison, different aspects of what the different agencies are looking for. And this is again, so this is just the NSF compared with AFREX in this case. AFREX is it's a program run by the U.S. Air Force. It's part of the Department of Defense, obviously, and again, they're looking for the Air Force is looking for more again technologies that are more readily usable right now. So of course, typically that means the companies are further along. They're a little bit larger. They should preferably have some sort of sales, some track record in sales, right? Which is, of course, not to say that, if you're a brand new company, it doesn't mean you have no chance, filing an application to the DoD, right? Of course, you can make up, if you have an idea that's really high impact, right? And you can make the case, hey, this is going to work, right? Then yeah, okay, you might still get the grant, right? So again, these are just general guidelines, right? So this is there are always exceptions to this, always. Okay, so basically, of course, there is, if you're watching the news, right, or read the news, and there's of course grants are being mentioned a lot, right? So this is a screen capture from the Department of Government Efficiency from 4 days ago, right? So basically, there's different agency priorities, right? So they're canceling DEI grants, basically, right? So now most of these grants are not for profit grants, but some are, right? So it's important to you know to know what to say, and I mean, it's I mean, of course, you could take the position, hey, I don't want to apply for a grant now at all, right? But of course, politics changes, right? And I mean, we have, we're advising some companies in the renewable energy space right now how to position themselves, for example, how to position themselves to still get funded without mentioning climate change, right? But there's always a way, right? And I mean, politics changes, administrations change, so it's still a good program, and if you end up getting the grant, then you can still fight climate change, so to speak, right? And you just position yourself in a way that is fundable, right? So yeah. So here, this is a summary slide of the status of the different political changes. Tangible changes, actually, as far as for-profit companies goes, actually not too many. Okay, the most impactful is the indirect cost rate that's limited to 15% now. Again, indirect cost rate, it's the overhead, right? The general and administrative overhead of running a project, running your company, supporting a project. Now, of course, if you're a startup, right? I mean, startups are lean, right? So again, in my opinion, I mean, we even a year or two ago, as I mentioned before, we would never have suggested an indirect cost rate above 15% anyway, right? Of course, if you're a large research institution, and for example, you're in the medical space, pharmaceutical space, of course, you have large machines. It takes or large pieces of equipment in large buildings, a lot of real estate that takes a lot of money just to maintain, right? And they have justifiable grievances over this limitation to 15%. But I dare say the majority of the potential founders on this call, it's not going to really affect you. Especially, I mean, the overall for-profit funding budget, it hasn't changed, right? It's still the same, right? Now there were staffing cuts, of course. You see that, you heard people were laid off at the NSF, NIH, other agencies. But again, this is not, the grant funds as such. They weren't affected by that. Now, what this could mean is that the processing time is going to, it's going to get longer again. Grant applications are going to slow down, or we do expect that. And actually, over the past years, the trend has been that the agencies have actually become more efficient, right? So I mean, compared to 4 or 5 years ago, especially the NIH, Department of Energy, also they've they're a lot faster now than they used to be. Okay. So then, of course, now there's cultural trends, right? Cultural trends, it's what I would call impact priorities. And of course, there it's 180-degree change, basically, social, environmental, impact, basically. So you might say there's a new brand of political correctness, right? With the opposite sign as political correctness was 10 years ago or five, and generally it's quite superficially applied, right? So they're looking for clinical works, right? Of course, they have limited resources going through those grant applications. So I mean, if you know what you're doing, you can definitely navigate your application, right? To get through this, and again, we'll help you do that. Okay. So general recommendations is, it's you should focus on economics and security right now, cost savings, national security, and generally speaking, I mean, domestic impact trumps global impact. No pun intended here. It's so here on the right side, there, of course, there are some topics that have a positive trend, a positive funding trend. That means there's more funding available now. Definitely blockchain, distributed ledger, right? It's basically the you know blockchain is part of that category. There is definitely what I would call nuclear renaissance, right? It's new nuclear startups but that actually already, to be fair, that has started last year already, before this administration. AI, definitely, there's a major change in AI cryptography, basically, yeah, online data security. What goes down, what declines in terms of relative funding priorities, traditional renewables, solar winds, right? Of course, infectious diseases, I don't need to go into detail on that, and public health, and anything you would call social entrepreneurship. but quite many topics didn't change, right? I mean, most medical topics. I mean, no one's gonna, you know, massively cancel, basically, cancer research grants or research grants into heart disease and things like that, medical imaging. It's not going to happen. Same thing with space and defense, right? That really hasn't changed, not substantially. On the surface a little bit, but certainly the net priorities, the net amounts haven't really changed. So NIH, I'm gonna go. So we're a little bit late, right? So NIH is it's similar, right? NIH has three funding deadlines: January, April, and September, always the 5th. Uh, so the NIH has two types of grants. There is the or two types of SBIR grants. I should say that there's many more outside SBIR, but two types of SBIR grants. One is open topic, and then there are special funding priorities, right? So the numbers quoted here, they're for the open topic category. For phase one, the funding, the amount is very similar to NSF. For phase two, it's considerably more money. Of course, it's because a lot of these are, or actually, I should say there are two more distinctions, right? So most NIH grants have two categories. One, where clinical trials are part of the proposal, and one where they're not, right? And obviously, especially if you have a clinical trial involved, that's what the 36 months is for, right? So yeah, the general topic in the NIH, it's also called the omnibus solicitation, right? So you can just submit a grant, and you don't actually need to know a priori which institute you're submitting it to, right? So you can just, of course, you should have an institute in mind when you write the grant, because if there is no institute that can pick it up, then it falls through the cracks, so to speak. But yeah, basically, again, that's the general funding topic. So the schedules here again. So this is sort of the timeline, right? So if you're looking at September, the next one is September. Then scientific merit review is at the end of the year. Advisory council review, where basically you will find out whether you get the funds or not. It's around the turn of the year, and then April next year you would get the funds. I know it's long, but sometimes these timelines are shorter. And in our experience, the faster they make up your mind, the better in terms of chances of you succeeding, right? So the faster they are, the better. But you don't know that at the time of application, of course. So NIH is not just one institute, it's many institutes. So it's everything from National Eye Institute to National Institute of Aging, NIA, which is doing things like dementia-related research, to um, it's National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, National Cancer Institute, obviously. So So these are some, we're 10 minutes before the end of the scheduled time. So this is just one example here. For example, National Institute of Dental and Craniofacial Research, some of their specific funding topics. So I mean, they have a big push into AI, basically automating treatment plans, automating basically analysis of data, of health data in general, and X-rays, and then automating treatment plans. So there's a big push on AI also in the NIH. biomedical imaging and bioengineering. So this is this is imaging, basically PET imaging. Of course, some of these technologies are already quite mature and quite capital intensive. So we don't get a lot of small businesses really applying for this. Okay, um, yeah. So this is okay. So let's get to so what do we do? So we consult on fundability, right? So if you approach us, right, so we do anything you don't want to do, in summary, right? So we write the grants, we generate them, we help them submit, we help you submit them. We do everything we can. If you want us to do it, there are certain things you have to do legally, and as far as agency rules go, but we do everything else. So we have, as far as I know, so we're the only agency that will assure you 100% domestic writing teams, 100% US based writing teams. So we have simple fees. Okay, so generally a simple structure, right? So so we have a partnership coming up with, again, with Ingenium patents. So if you have any kind of, patent questions, you know, patent projects, right? Which, especially as a not that well-funded startup, um, it's basically, so yeah, we would like to refer you to Ingenium Patents. So also we help you access international ecosystems. So we have partnerships outside the US, with, of course, not equally distributed around the world, but it's focused on certain countries. So our terms are, we have a combination of a startup fee and a success-based fee. So I mean, our compensation for standard grants, the startup fee is less than 5%, actually usually much less than 5% of our total compensation. For others, for more complicated, more unique grant applications, it's a little higher. So we assure 100% confidentiality. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we don't let you talk to each other on this webinar, right? It's we want everyone to be safe and secure, that we won't tell anyone you're talking to us. NDAs are no problem, right? So as in contrast to venture capital firms, we will always sign a reasonable NDA. And one important statement: we only work with companies we think can win, and this is because almost all of our compensation is success based. So this is an example here of compensation for how an NSF grant, for example, works, right? So we sign the contract, right, and then there is a startup fee due within a month typically. And that startup fee, it's in the four figures, typically in the lower four figures. This is the reason we need a startup fee is because, in our experience, startups get busy with incredibly many things at the same time. So if you have no skin in the game, then you might forget that you want to file this grant application, and if you don't file it, we don't get paid. So that's and we invested a bunch of work at that point, right? So there is the project pitch. So 4 weeks before the deadline, we submit the project pitch. And so then there is, after a few months, there's due diligence. During due diligence, the agency can ask you any questions they want. typically verifying, claims you make in your grant application, right? So they can check everything from your staff's resumes, whether that master's degree is really from the institution they claim it is from, or whether you actually have the facilities you claim you have, and so forth. They can ask you anything, right? And of course, you know, we're we're there. We're holding your hands during that period. It's So you need to be on top of your game. It would be a pity if you lose the grant during due diligence, because once you make it into due diligence, the grant is kind of yours to lose. Okay. Then there is the phase one award, right? In the case of the NSF, 305,000, and we take a success fee of up to 15%, depending how much. I mean, if we do everything, it's up to 15%. And it's only after the award, right? Yeah. So if we do less, if it's more a consulting arrangement, it's less, of course. So then we can apply for phase two even before phase one ends. Whether you want to do that, it depends, right? It might not be recommendable, right? If you think you have reached most of your goals, you can apply for phase two already. You can only apply for phase two once. Okay, then you lose it if you don't win it. For phase one, you can reapply as many times as you want. And one of our services, if phase one gets rejected once, will submit once for free, one application for free, one resubmission. And then for the phase two award, our success fee it's lower than again it peaks at around 12%. It's a lower success fee in percentage. So here this is basically this is a typical. I mean, so here on the left hand side, if you do it yourself, right? If you prepare a grant application yourself, this is an estimate of the equivalent cash burn you will have, right? Because of course, if your team works on a grant application instead of building something, then they cannot build at the same time, right? Then you're looking for a literature to back up your grant application, and I mean, you take easily, I mean, putting together, especially an NSF application, it takes easily 30 per diems at $600 a day, and $600 a day is not very generous administrative time. So if you add up everything, we're kind of calculating $37,000 in time lost to apply for the grants, and then of course that doesn't even capture the runway you're losing, right? Because if half your engineering team works on the grant application for 3 months, okay. Now, if we do it, if even with the startup fee of $4,000, that is much less, and then the time investment from your side is of course far lower. I mean, typically we have meetings. If you want to have meetings, we have meetings once a week. If you want to do everything by email, that's fine too. It's different organizations work differently in that department. Okay, so I'm going to okay, so this is so you don't need to take any pictures of any slides. If you did anyway, that's fine. If you want to take one picture of a slide, take this picture. You can send me an email. So we will send you a recording of both presentations within probably about a week to 10 days. But if you have questions prior to that, reach out to us. So we have a couple of initiatives. Yes, we're looking for grant writers. So if you if you know someone who's in grad school, a little bit further along, sort of past the course phase, or a postdoc or so, or maybe a chunk professor who would like to supplement their income and maybe get some contacts, research contacts in the private sector at the same time, reach out to us. So these are requirement. You have to be US based. So you have to have work permits in the US, of course. And if you we're looking for companies that are willing to referrals, right? To maybe maybe do a little video or so, basically describing their experience with Equasio. So we give you a significant discount if you're willing to do that. Okay. So that's it. As far as content goes, so it is 8 o'clock Pacific, so it's the